Hello, everyone. On behalf of Library Makers, I'd like to welcome you to Dealing with Low Program Turnout. My name is Marnie Balint. I'm the Experiential Learning Supervisor at Skokie Public Library right outside of Chicago. Um, I am on the events committee here for Library Makers, along with Karen and Kelly, who you see in the chat as well. Um, Library Makers is a community that connects and supports library staff from all over the country and libraries big and small who are all at different points in their maker journey. Whether you're just getting started or you've been making for many years, we welcome you to our online community. LibraryMakers.org has its own social platform where you can connect and get to know one another, share questions, ideas, and resources, enjoy blog posts on relevant topics, and peruse a video library of past events. Please note that today's event will also be recorded. Do not feel obligated to put on your camera if you don't like to do so. Before we get started, I'm going to launch a quick poll so we can get to know the audience today a little bit better. Give me one moment and I'll do that. All right, you should be able to see the poll now in front of you. It talks about what region you are from, what type of library you're from, and what best describes the community that your library serves. And so you should be able to see it now, and if you can't, please let me know. All right, if you're just joining us, we're doing this quick poll to get to know a little bit more about you. This information is really so helpful for us, so thank you so much for taking the time to fill it out. We encourage all of you to go back and fill out your profile on Library Makers as well so that others can know a little bit more about you and you can connect with other people in your area or farther away if you're doing conferences and things like that. Wow, it looks like the majority we have the Midwest and the South. Interesting. Nobody outside of the US. I'll share it in just a moment. Most of us are in public libraries. It's not a big surprise there. It looks like suburban and rural are the places that most of us are doing. So let a few more people answer that before I share it with everybody. Thank you so much for doing this for us. Okay, I'm going to give it a few more seconds. All right, ending the poll and I'm sharing the results. But basically, you can see that it looks like most of us are from the Midwest and the South. Most of us are in public libraries. And then it also looks like rural and suburban are the places that we help provide the most support to. That's really cool. All right. Well, welcome everybody. This is Dealing with Low Program Turnout, our first snack break. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can take a look to either share where so we can see everybody and make this more of a discussion versus a lecture. Sorry, apologies. I haven't spoken a lot today. But anyways, so this is more of a discussion to talk about are you having low program turnout? Do you need more support? What are other libraries doing in your maker spaces and your programs as well? And I really want it to be a time for us to discuss tips, solutions, and commiserate with our fellow makers. So to start it off, anyone is feel free to unmute yourself or type it in the chat, and we'll take a monitor of that as well. But what is everybody doing currently? How are you getting data and interacting with people in your spaces and in your programs? How are you getting people interested in your programs? What are everyone doing currently? Anybody like to share?
I don't mind sharing.
Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm in a
Hi,
public
Sarah.
library in Whitewater, Wisconsin. So we're just kind of close to Madison, a little south of Madison, if that gives you an idea of where we're at. But anyway, so we do how I market programs is, we obviously market on our website and with flyers in the library and everything. And then we have an email newsletter that goes out to our patrons. And then I do social media, like right now we just do Facebook and Instagram. I would try to like to kind of I don't want to just keep relying on those two things for social media. I want to find like new ways to kind of like, get our programs out there, which is, it's just hard because we're a smaller library. We don't have like a marketing budget per se. So we're not really paying for any of like that kind of advertising. And then I send out a press release that goes to our local newspapers and our kind of like local online news website, and they do actually a really good job of promoting our programs for us for free. There are a couple kind of like local radio stations that are always willing to, call us and have us, just give a little blurb. So that's kind of what we're doing right now.
That's awesome. That's a lot of stuff. That's a lot of ways to get different people who are doing different avenues. So that's really great too. Anybody else want to share what they're currently doing?
We're doing similar. We have I'm from the Berryville Public Library in Arkansas, and we're pretty small as well. And we do the flyers, we do the newspaper is good about covering things afterwards, and we're always in there like beforehand, like announcements of just what's going on in the area. Um, but we do flyers and everything, but we found that like word of mouth is like social media does nothing for us as far as Facebook and all of that.
Hmm.
It seems like
Okay,
mostly word of mouth for us.
interesting. That's really interesting too, because sometimes we'll have a certain demographic that are definitely more in tune to social media and see that we're doing, and sometimes we'll have a larger demographic that is just like, oh, I brought 12 of my friends because I told them all about this program as well. Anybody else doing something different with their spaces on how they're sharing programs and getting the word out?
We do all of the things that have been listed, but the number one thing that we do that I see people at our programs is personal invitations when they're in the library.
Mm,
I mean, every single program, I'm just always really surprised and pleasantly that people are in there that I invited
yeah,
when they were visiting the library.
that's really great too, because especially with if you're in a makerspace or you're staffing people that are working in your makerspace too, like their relationships with the people that are in those spaces are very like well developed as they're seeing them pretty often. And so we definitely have a higher number of people that are like, oh yeah, so and so told me about this program who works for you. Definitely interested in doing this and things like that too. So that's really great. Anybody else doing something different? But yeah, the personal invitations, that's really cool.
Mine's in a similar vein, word of mouth, but talking a lot with staff as well, like the children's
Mm,
librarian, teens librarians, because then they will then tell their regulars, or they'll be like, oh, I know who would love to go to this. So they'll like tell their regulars or the patrons that they're connected with.
great. And also, I'm seeing in the chat too that people are typing some answers. So thank you so much for doing that. It looks like Cynthia says that we have library flyers, social media, a direct email monthly, occasional press releases, occasional TV and radio interviews. Oh, that's cool. She does displays promoting larger programs at some of our branches. Uh, Kimla started a monthly newsletter and distributes around her small town, addition to small weekly newsletter and signs in the library and socials. That's really cool. And then cross promotions, interesting, and other similarly targeted programs works well. Something too that we do in our makerspace in our specific areas around the library is we have interactive whiteboards that will ask like a weekly or bi-weekly question to get people interested about what might be coming up as well so they can write down their answers. The biggest problem with that is making sure staff in there know to monitor it for excess graffiti or drawing that's not appropriate for the library. So we have found too that parents will be like, "Oh, my child is just drawing on that. Why can't they just draw on it?" I'm like, "Well, it's for a specific question for a specific gathering." So that has been working well as long as staff in the area know what kind of be able to monitor it. What kind of questions do you ask? It looks like I ask a bunch of different questions. So specifically for the makerspace, I've been asking questions are like, what's your favorite project? What's your favorite machine? What's something you've made you're proud of? What advice do you have for people who are just getting started as crafters? What type of programs are you interested in seeing? What type of things do you want to learn? So I'm trying to be more open-ended with my questions and not just like a yes or no, but I have a youth STEAM lab as well that we have activities in every day. And so we're there. I do mostly questions that are like tallies. Like, do you like Legos or do you like stacking cups more? And to get more interaction based off that. For Groundhog Day last week, we like, do you think the groundhog is going to see a shadow or not? And then we talked about the science of the groundhog, which is not there, but it was fun to talk about. Cool. Does anybody else have anything that they want to share about what they're currently doing? Great. So we've talked a lot about what we're currently doing and what we're doing now. So interactive whiteboards, print newsletters, comment cards, things like that. What type of programs do your patrons want to see is something else that I have worked with my team a lot about. Programs that we like might not be programs that our patrons want to come see. So the whiteboard has been really helpful in us sort of specifically pointing in a direction of what's helpful for what our community wants. So the newsletter is great. The whiteboard is great for interacting for us specifically. But for program formats, are you doing workshops, lectures, discussion, hands-on pop-ups, planned things? I don't know if anybody else has this problem, but because of like newsletter and events and every other team that needs to update our website, we're planning like 4 or 5 months out in advance for programs. And so the interest might be in January, everybody's interested in doing this indoor sort of cozy knitting activity, but then in May, they might not be interested in that. Does anybody else have similar like feelings or things that they've navigated like that?
Hi, I'm Kelly. I'm from Lincoln Township Library in Stevensville, Michigan. And I would have to agree with you that like our newsletter right now, like we have to plan everything like 4 months in advance. So like right now we're in our January through April newsletter cycle. And sometimes like it can be kind of hard to like kind of figure out like what people are interested in. Like I've had like for example, I've had met like people for years like, oh, we would love like a knitting club, crochet club. And I recently started like last year that particular program. And I think the most I maybe have gotten for one session was 8, and that was like during like one of the summer months, surprisingly. But kind of since then, I think it's also because we have a lot of like older ladies, and because we get a lot of snow, you don't always see some of them like want to come out to the library as much when it's like blizzardy outside. And then we also have a couple ladies that like to go down south for the summer. God bless them. Um, and sometimes that can be kind of difficult, and sometimes like the time of day is like hard to figure out too, because we do have a lot of like senior patrons that would they can want to come they can come out at like 2 in the afternoon for a program. And we've had a lot of patrons that they want more evening stuff, and trying to get them in for and trying to do more evening programs can be a challenge, especially like when because some of us we get like one night a week where one of us has to be there, and half the time we're on the desk or something. And it sometimes gets hard to like schedule certain programming because it's like, well, that's the only night I work during the week to do that.
Hmm, interesting. Anybody else? Something that we're doing too at our library is something we're starting with smaller programs to see if there is interest. And so trying not to feel like either having registration required or have a cap of how many people can join to see if there is interest in this program. And then if it is sort of a bust and nobody comes, we sort of reintegrate those materials that were going to be used for the program into our makerspace or for our STEAM lab, so it's not necessarily a waste. So we've been trying to do that, be like, is there an interest to this? Is this just something that I want to do and I'm interested in, or is this something that my community is interested in? So we've had a lot of discussions about that as well, which is really interesting. Um, I think also on our website, we have a part where patrons can request specific programs. So we've been sort of like cross-referencing that as well with community members and how many people in the community. We seem to have more luck with outside presenters versus inside presenters, in the sense that if we have an outside presenter, people are more excited about coming to a program with like a fresh perspective and a fresh face, even though this is sort of our job and we have a lot of expertise in the makerspace world and these things as well. Um, but I think that we've been seeing that if we have more people in the community who are able to teach their expertise, that's been more interesting for a lot of our patrons, which is really cool. Um, And it looks like Jennifer Berry said that she's definitely noticed the same thing over the years. And then a different Jennifer is moving away from tech programming to more domestic skills like sewing and cooking, etc. Yes, we have been seeing in our library as well a huge uptick in wanting fiber arts programs. Um, we also have some coming down as well. Um, and I'm quite excited to do that because it's been allowing more people to be interested in it. And as well as the more fiber arts programs that we're having, we're seeing also it's less delineated by gender, which is really interesting. I'm getting a lot of high school boys that are really interested in learning how to use the sewing machines in our makerspace, which I'm like, cool. I do not want to scare them away from the makerspace and learning how to sew their own clothes, but also it's sometimes sort of an anomaly. Um, but yeah, anybody else, a local crocheter who came to our beginner crochet program, and it was a huge intergenerational program that was really cool. We also had, we have a huge Urdu speaking population in our town, so we had crocheting in Urdu, and that was a really popular program. So we're also trying to have more programs that are the same program, but maybe provided in different languages and different abilities. So we're trying to do that as well. Do people find that the more specific their program is helpful, or the more broad program there is helpful? I know that sometimes if you have a super broad program, people will be like, oh, that's not for me. But the more specific, we might not have as big a population. What do people think about that?
I mean, I've had success with both, like, but I do think one thing to kind of keep in mind is like having, having ways to kind of have different levels. So like people can like interact with the program, like whether you're a beginner or maybe you're somewhere in the middle or like advanced. Like I'm just thinking with fiber art, for example. Because I know some of my like fiber art things I've done, you might get people in who like have no experience with like crochet, for example, but then some other people might have done it before or have, or like trying to get people to kind of, work with more of the advanced people too. Sometimes that works really well. When it works when it works, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. That's just another thing to kind of think about.
That's really cool. Jennifer Berry said that she has regular patrons and locals create programming with me, such as Spring Around the World, that allows locals to share their spring holidays with others. That's really cool too. Something else that I've noticed is that the more collaborations and partnerships we have with community members, the more people are invested, which we talked about a little bit earlier. More specific knowing they are making a certain thing, the more specific of a topic, but I agree that being flexible for multiple levels of experience and skill. We've been doing a lot more planned programs, but in a drop-in nature. I'm sure most people here have heard of like third space. If your home is your first space and your work is your second space, then the library is a third space. That it's where you spend a lot of your time that you don't necessarily have to pay to be at. Um, so we're doing a lot more third space programming, which is sort of like drop-in programs for community building, which we've been seeing from our community that's really requested specifically lately. And we're trying to create longer programs with the drop-in nature of like you can come anytime. You don't have to come exactly when it starts. You don't have to stay until the end. Someone can help you learn. You can either learn from a beginner point of view or from a more advanced point of view to just talk to people. And that we have been seeing has been pretty receptive, and we're trying to build off of that too. Kelly said in the chat that she does a monthly painting program where she's gotten more attendance when she teaches it, but have been steadily getting attendance during the sessions where they can paint whatever they want with available tutorials. Has anyone else done something similar?
Yeah, when I first got here, people were really afraid of our makerspace because it's reservation based and it's got a lot of high tech stuff. So they felt they shouldn't go in there unless they knew what they were doing. And that was, of course, not what we wanted. So that's why we switched Saturdays to a show and tell. So it's 3 hours. We have one staff member there. They created the activity for that day, they wrote the directions. And then they also give tours as people come in and see that there's something free they can do there. And it's not, a big barrier of learning to do this one thing. And we've seen a huge growth of new people just from that. So that's every Saturday then on a rotation with our staff.
Yeah, that's awesome. We've not done that, but in a similar vein, we have a display called Patron Showcase where we just, if they have an extra project or if they let us take a picture of their project that we can post with a Polaroid, that's been really helpful to show people like, look, these are ideas that people have just come up with by being in the space to sort of make it more accessible in that sense of you don't need to be an expert to be able to do this. Does anyone else do other things similar to get patrons more interested in your makerspace? Cynthia says, we've done some community programs like a community quilt that people could make a specific size square, picking up the materials at an introduction event. Then people could come in with the finished block, which we then put together and put on a huge quilt rack and invited people to come and hand quilt on. That's really cool. That's awesome, Cynthia. Anybody else do something similar? Not, could be a community quilt, could be something else. Display past projects. Yeah, that's great.
So we're a small one-room library, so we get a lot of attendance, additional attendance just from having programs, period, because people will hear or see. And so in some ways, having a small library is good, because you just get those drop-ins because they see
Yeah.
something's going.
Yeah. I know I've talked to some other local maker spaces near me. I'm right outside of Chicago, and a few of them have said that their maker space is in the basement, so there's not a lot of foot traffic. We are on the second floor, so it's sort of out of the way, but we're in like a fishbowl, so people do see us pretty often and just sort of pop in. There's a lot of like hands on the glass being like what you're doing, even though the door is open and they're welcome to come inside. Please just come inside. You're welcome in here. Does anyone else think that that hinders or helps any of their programming based off their location specifically? Also, something that I've been thinking a lot about specifically with like programs is when sometimes when I've in the past when we've had a drop-in event, we don't get a ton of people if it's specifically in the space and it's more about like sharing your projects as it is to like doing a specific project. But how do you gather feedback, comments, and evaluations for your program? This is something that I've discovered has been more helpful than I thought it was going to be. So what do you all do for your libraries?
Some of the patrons I'm pretty friendly with, especially at like some of my more crafty programs and stuff. I usually try to talk to them, kind of get their input on things, and a lot of them are usually talking about the library while they're there as well. And sometimes I'll like, especially or what like when I'm doing the painting program, like I mentioned in the comments, it's like, okay, well, is there like something you would love to learn how to paint? Maybe I can find a tutorial on that and then bring it to the next session or something along those lines. So me, I'm a chatty Cathy sometimes. Like I like to try to talk to people when I can, because that's usually where I kind of get like the best feedback. Is like sometimes going on Facebook, especially nowadays, it's like I just don't want to be on there. So I prefer more like talking face to face if possible, as opposed to like looking up anything on social media.
Cool. Okay, great. Anybody else? What do you do to get feedback for your programs? Christina S. said the city has us use Qualtrics to make surveys connected to QR codes. But I will be starting some more basic mark making feedback that can help us. Not everyone wants to scan a code that we get no input. True. Feedback forms on what they think we can improve on, etc. We also have comment cards at our library that have been supremely helpful. Um, Online form that they can fill out or program evaluation sheet. That's really great too. Um, yeah, anybody else use something different? I know that like sometimes word of mouth is very popular. Something too that I've been noticing how when you're creating programs, is anyone else working with other departments in their library or their makerspace? I've been working with like the info services department or advisory department or youth services, and that's been really helpful to sort of get a community that I would not normally have access to, which is people who want to use the makerspace and know about the makerspace. So I've been trying to collaborate and be like, I'm going to do this program with this department and this program with this department. And they say it's also helpful for them too because they learn more about the makerspace. I've noticed sometimes staff in my library have a hard time understanding what happens in the makerspaces and STEM labs, mostly because they don't spend a lot of time there, and vice versa. I don't know what's happening in every other department as well. Um, but I'm curious how you work within your library to reach audiences that you wouldn't normally reach. Cynthia says that we've done some outreach at nearby college art departments, retiree group meetings, farmers markets, etc. That's really awesome. Jennifer said, I'm basically every department at our tiny library, but strong partnerships with the school and other community organizations. Totally understand that. Anybody else? Please feel free to unmute and share, or you can type in the chat.
We also work with like our civics groups,
Mm.
Rotary, Lions Club, that kind of thing because they have enough partnerships that between all of us, we can make a great ghost.
That's awesome. Christina S. says that I have found that other departments are already doing maker programs, but they don't realize it. I want to put all those programs under one banner of the makerspace, even though it's not just my staff running those. I feel the same way. Sometimes I'm like, oh, that's a makerspace program, or that's a makerspace program, or whoa, I didn't even know we were doing that. And it's really interesting to see what people are coming up and creating with for the library, that it's like, it's connected. Like, let me know. I'll give you resources. I'll give you materials. Please just let me know. Um, I'm assuming that other people, based off the reactions, also feel similarly. Um, Anybody else have anything about what's a program that you've done that you thought was like really interesting recently and then like had very little turnout? Tell me a little bit about the bad stuff. Well, a YouTube channel with playlists devoted to adult arts and crafts and kids arts and craft videos. That's really cool too.
We do a cosplay workshop because our group is really into cosplay. And so we we had done more classroom-based things for teens. It'd be like a 3-hour class where you leave with something. And then they're going to do some others where it's more conversational, and our staff will be there, like taking questions of how you break down your outfit and what you're looking for and different techniques. But recently we tried to do one more of a lecture where you actually had to register to be there, and they wanted to know how many people to expect. We had opened it up to 30 people. We only got 12 that signed up and only 7 that came. And so that was a little disappointing. We don't know if it was the format, that lecture style, or what. So we'll see how these others that are more drop-in conversational get-togethers will go. But cosplay has been a big thing for us.
It's so funny because interestingly enough, when we have a registration program, it goes through the roof and there's a ton of wait list and everyone shows up. But we have a drop-in program, it's like no one shows up. And I don't know why, if it's like regionally, if it's our community, but I have the exact opposite problem.
It's the same for our library as well. Like we've had programs where it's like registration, like it closes out immediately. But like
Mm,
when I'm like hoping for like, oh, drop-ins, it's like, and you have no idea what to expect. It's like, oh, it's a ghost town in here. I think I remember reading somewhere someone brought up that like maybe when you register, you feel like you have to be there because you registered.
mm,
Whereas like a drop in, it's like, oh, and then they forget about it.
yeah.
But then you have people that register and just don't show up, which is always
Yeah,
fun.
I did a Saturday just recently. It was drop-in like we normally do. I had 56 people. Like it's just our drop-in is so much more successful than our classes, and our classes generally it's maxed out at 15. But
Mm,
even then, maybe half of those come.
okay.
So registration is just never very interesting for our area.
Okay, interesting. It says Jane in the chat said that we did a program for adults with developmental disabilities, which went really well, but was not full. We were hoping to connect with more community organizations for our next one to increase attendance. I think this is a matter of getting the word out. Similarly, in our library, we do an early entry program once a month. So for teens, families, and adults with disabilities, they're able to come to the library before it's open and experience the library. We also get therapy dogs once a month to come in. So it's like less noise, less people, less crowded. We just started piloting opening up the makerspace for teens and adults with disabilities as well. That has proved it was slow going at first, but it's proved really successful because then the teens and families who experience the makerspace with a little bit more hands-on support in a quieter environment are able to come back during the week and use the makerspace as intended, which is really cool. Um, so sometimes part of that is just like this program was slow, but I think it's really important. Let's do it again and again until it picks up a little bit. But that also feels like a slog sometimes. Um, yeah. We've got people
So-
saying that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, hey, sorry, new here. So we also have so we do have like art orientations and stuff like that. So we do have like wait lists, different things. But we also have noticed that people don't come to free public events, especially if it's on a Saturday or something like that. So even though you are waitlisted, we still recommend people like still show up anyway, just because that's just what we've seen over the past 4 years, going on this library makerspace.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we do, especially on like busier weekends and stuff like that. Just kind of open up the wait list.
Yeah, because if nothing else, even if you don't have supplies, they could probably still learn, even if they're not getting to make the exact thing that they want to make. So that's a good way of thinking about it too.
Yeah, and a lot of it is just like getting people oriented. So a lot of it is like, hey, come learn about the 3D printers. After that, you're able to come reservation based system. So
Okay, cool. Anybody else? I know we're coming close to the end of this, so I totally understand if people need to bow out. Kelly is going to very kindly share a post survey. Speaking of surveys, Kelly's going to share one for library makers for us. This just helps us about if this program was helpful for you. What do you want to see in the future? What can we provide for you? Myself, Marnie, and Kelly and Karen are all part of the events committee, so please reach out to any of us anytime. We're glad to always hear your feedback about what would be most helpful. We've got a couple events coming down the pipeline too, which we're really excited about. Next week, we're doing equity in maker spaces. And then in March, we're having another snack break about painting programs in your library. So more cool events to come from library makers, but please always feel free to reach out to us, send us a message on library makers, or find us from our library. We'll be glad to do that. And we will try and share this recording as well on our YouTube channel, or we'll write up a post about it as well. So the information that we've shared in this chat can get out to people as well. Any last minute comments or questions before we wrap this up? Thank you so much for coming. Kelly has just posted the Google survey. Please fill it out if you have a moment. It's really quick. It's like 30 seconds. And thank you so much and have a great day. Thank you so much for joining our snack break. Bye, everybody.